into the dissertation, it will have at most about 3 pages, and what it should contain, I will briefly tell, but I don't need that long of time to talk about that, as well as I don't need the slides to tell what comes into that section. So I will talk a few things related to some of the questions that was not directly answered as well. So let me put this aside for a moment. So at the start, we spoke about the introduction chapter, and introduction, basically you introduce the project, and when you start the project also you write your proposal by introducing what you are going to do. So that is the first point of time where you come across the problem you are going to solve. So most of the time, if the problem was given by somebody else, you will not know much about the problem. Right? So you will get more familiar with the problem only when you spend more time. And so as a result, when you initially define the problem, define the objectives, define the scope, you have some vague idea, but you don't know exactly how that would be done or what would be the result. So when you come to the conclusion chapter, basically what you need to do is to revisit and see what you have achieved from that original objective. So when you initially define, for example, depending on, we spoke about various examples. I will just take it, say, you develop some library system or some library, and then so the idea is to come up with some automated solution to automate whatever the task of the library. And from the librarian point of view or the client point of view, it may be to do some specific task. So the specific task may be, okay, how to record the information about the books in the library. So, so if that is done, maybe the librarian is happy. But when you do the project, basically, now we spoke about the scope. So ultimately we have to come up with a solution of how you do that, and then you finally demonstrate. So when you demonstrate that, the evaluation board will look at, okay, the part you have done, is that enough for the project, or is that enough for 300 hours of work, and so forth. So this 20 minutes demonstration time, we will look at whether this judgment of this work is adequate or not. So now, so what we are going to show during that 20 minutes is basically related to the scope you have achieved. So, for example, if the scope was to show the books of the library, okay, that is what you are going to show. But if you are going to demonstrate that, then how you will do that is, you will have some form to capture some data on the books, and once you do that, then the next book comes. It's another set of data, but more or less the same thing. So the examiner will not be interested to see you entering the 10,000 books and showing this is my 1 year's work. Basically, as a function, this is just capturing the information about books. So capturing information about a book, you can demonstrate within a minute or two. So then, if that is what you are going to show, it will be not enough as a 1 year project. So you have to judge, okay, the library wants this, but as the project examining board is concerned, what else you could do with that? So once you have the information of the books, obviously you can see whether this book is in the library or not. But then you can also say, okay, if it is available, how someone can reserve the book if is if they want to come and borrow it, or you can actually borrow it, or if the borrowing process is there, or you can make a request for somebody already borrowed to return it. So you say the borrowing period is now over, there is another request to borrow. So you can add various functions and expand the scope. So once you do that, then you will have also now to borrow, you will want to know who are the people who can borrow. So you have to have some members' details. Then you will have the facility to, when the book is returned, how to recognize that. Then you have to see if it returned late, how you are going to translate. So you will not just accept, you will have a file. That means you need another function, how to determine the borrowed date, how long you are kept, the calculation of fine, and so forth. And then, if there are a lot of demand for a particular book, how the librarian will identify that. So based on the usage, you will know this book is being used so often, maybe you need more copies. So that means to have the same data to come up with various reports which will enhance the functions of that particular system. So likewise, you need to look at what are these things the librarian will not know to tell you. The user, something places it is like obvious, they may not tell, you have to ask the question, and sometimes at the beginning you also don't know what the system is, so you don't know what to ask. So when you work with it only, you also think of these issues. So actually, to recognize these things, you have to see potential users. So, for example, if you are using a library, then you will think, if I am going to use this library, what are the functions I need? So likewise, whatever the system you do, you have to look at from the different users' point of view, whether these facilities are there, and if so, how to provide. So through that, you can strengthen your scope, and there is no clear distinction to say, if you do this part, then that is adequate. So basically, you have to play safe. So always you should have something more than the boundary time, so that then you have done more than what the board is expecting. And certainly you have to try. If you have not enough time to complete, okay, you have done this, but these things I couldn't do it. But then these I have identified that missing things. So you identify them and indicate them, and these will be some future work you will do to improve the system. So as a conclusion chapter, basically what you will do is, you will relook at your original objective, original scope, and see what you have achieved, what changes, deviations you have done for various reasons, and then by the experience you gain, you may come up with certain things, and you may suggest the librarian good to have these type of things, like, okay, you send a SMS message to the whoever has received done a reservation, or an email. So some things you may not implement, but you can suggest. Those will be future work, and so those things you could write in 2-3 pages, and that is what is expected from the conclusion chapter. Now, so one of the key things from what you need to realize is, you have to think from the user aspect of the system. So based on the typical users, how they will use it, the same way the exam board will also look at it. So the exam board, if they think that the user will use it usually through the internet, then they will ask why the internet option was not considered. Why it was standalone? If it was something not required from a normal user too. Now, for example, if I develop something for you all to access results, or something which I do it standalone, that we all have to come to our place to pick the data. So that is not practical. So therefore, when we will ask, why did you put it in a internet-based application? So likewise, you have to think which way the user would typically want, and then come up with the solution accordingly. be able to set up. We will also give around 10-15 minutes for setting up and basically why the previous duration is going will be asked to set up and wait out. So if you spend time on configuring, then you are unnecessarily panicking before the exam, and that will affect your how you face the firework. Now, there are questions on the simulation aspect. Now, those days, when you want to show a mobile application, that was the only way to do it, because you didn't expect people to bring it. Nowadays, it's different. But then, those days, the mobile part was a small part of another system. So it's just sending some message to something, and then you show through that. So, if the whole system is on a simulator, then again, you have to see that you have 20 minutes of things to show. But we are not interested in seeing you entering data and things like that. So if you now, for example, for testing also, what we say, document it and read. For example, when you enter data, you have a username, password, you may do some validation to make sure certain things are tested, so that we don't want you to use that 20 minutes to do that task. We want you to show it in a documented form. Even if you haven't submitted in the dissertation, and really separately and say that you have done this, but not to spend the time for that. So, time is to show that the functionality is there, so that you have some already data for who's entered. Then you show this is how the login process happens, this is how the library gets the information to see the popular books used and various things, and minimize the data entry, and therefore convince the resting part. You also need to have some adequate data recorded. So, from the technology aspect, basically from the various classes you will attend, you will learn Java, but not specific tools you will come across. So that is part of this learning curve, and these technologies, what you have today, won't be there in another 2 years' time. So you need to have the skill of selecting this appropriate tool at the time you want to use it, and so that is part of the training. And but main thing is not to waste a lot of time on learning how to use the tool, because our timing for the 300 hours, obviously there is a learning curve for that, but main thing is you know Java, and then you will need a couple of days to get familiar, but then later on using them for implementation. And so for that, up to now, you have the internal report to submit. So what we expect is for you all to do the requirement gathering, analysis, design up to now. So we don't expect you all to start implementation by now. The implementation you will start from May. So that's how the scheduling is done. So that means you start implementation in May, June, July. You have 3 months to do implementation testing, and then you need some time to do the documentation. So if you have done the first 3 chapters documentation, then you need time to write only the remaining implementation testing rest of the chapters. So after dissertation is only left if you have done this process properly. So so that's why the importance with respect to the interim report. And as we mentioned, so if you haven't submitted the proposal, that means you can't conclude the project. Similarly, if you haven't submitted the interim report, you assume you are a dropout, and then you don't submit the dissertation, then again we consider you as a dropout, and then finally the Viva to come and do the defense. Then the client aspect, basically you need to select some appropriate client. So certain applications obviously these public users are there, so you have to see what's the best way to justify, because ultimately we expect you all to gather requirements go through the typical life cycle, and in a typical environment, you have a different group to gather the requirements, different group to do the documentation, different group to develop, different group to test, and so forth. So the idea of this written report is, if I take this implementation and give answer to implement, it will be able to implement. So if you can't understand your requirement from that and cannot implement, that means you have not achieved the design things what you are looking for. But to pass the project, basically you don't need a perfect thing in all these stages. We look at whether you have gone through these various stages. So if you have done a very good thing, you will get a better mark. But even with a weaker design, you can still pass if you have done reasonable implementation. Because that is the one we give more weight ultimately when during the evaluation. So in the Bible, you are given 5 minutes to explain what you are going to do. So similarly, in the dissertation also, you have to write an abstract summarizing all your work in a half a page or so. So that means you need to have the skill of identify the 4 areas and conveying it to the people concerned. So I will just go through a few questions which we put aside from last time. Now there was a question on doing a project to implement an algorithm. So most of these projects what we are looking for is implementing some business process. So not basically implementing an algorithm as such or implementing something based on results. It basically needs more time, more guidance, and so that's why we discourage them. So here asking whether they can develop a test program, test game. So that type of project we don't recommend, and you will have various bottlenecks if you try to develop what we are proposing here. There are several suggestions. Some of them we will try to see how we can introduce them gradually. So having these seminars also is one of them. It's good to have, but then based on the availability, practicability, we have to see. So the practical example of implementing a project from A to Z is a good thing, but then one of the things is it will be just some idea of how it happens. It doesn't mean that's the perfect way or the best way. There is no best way in doing things. There are so many alternative ways of doing. So some of the dangers of giving is you may be restricted to one way of thinking. So as you saw, there are so many different ways of designing and implementing and carrying out things. Yeah, there is also a request about access to some of the Microsoft development tools. Again, we will need to further look into this and check what the policies with respect to providing to the external students. So they think it is possible, we will make some arrangements. Maybe not possible for this SR because we will need time. But I think we discussed this earlier and they said not for external students. Then there is a question on the GPA and what happens if you repeat and get a grade. So the repeating and passing, the main effect is for those who are aiming for a class. So when you repeat and we'll say you get an A, your A is considered for the calculator. So your GPA is calculated using the value given for However, if you are also aiming at a class, then the class criteria, the maximum you can be given when you are repeating is up to a C, is the calculation for a class. But now you would have noticed that for a class, for the project, we have mentioned you need A or B for the project, otherwise you are not given a class. So that facility is not prevented for the student. For example, if you get an A in the second attempt, so the attempt is, if you come for 2 vivas, then it's 2 attempts. If you get registered, submit internal report, submit the destination, not come for viva, then it is not an attempt. The attempt is only when you come for the demonstration viva. Till then, whatever you do and not come, it goes as not complete, it is not an attempt. So you may try halfway several times, but only the time you came for the viva, the exam, when you sit only, we count. If you are absent, it is not counted. So viva also, if you are absent, it is not counted. So if you came for 2 vivas and later you say A or B, then for the GPA, class GPA, we calculate that as a C. But after calculating, you can still have a 3 point some GPA. Then we will look at whether you have the A or B in that repeat attempt. And in that case, you will also get a class. So there are students who have got classes by repeating the project. So the possibility is there, but it is hard because the GPA is calculated using a C value for the project. So if you have done well in the others, you can still, you don't lose those facilities. So I have basically covered basically some of the questions we skipped earlier. So any further questions one I could address. So from the conclusion chapter, as mentioned, basically we look at basically the testing section, seminar mentioned about the evaluation. So once you evaluate also you get some feedback to what extent your scope is met. And so some summary of the shortened form of description of what your final outcome is, what is explained in the conclusion chapter, and as well as some future things you should improve. So any further questions you want before we go to the concluding